At precisely 4:13 a.m., the city of Tel Aviv was torn awake by an explosion so violent it shattered windows across a 5-kilometer radius. Within minutes, thick, acrid smoke curled into the sky, suffocating the morning sun. Cars burned in silence. High-rise buildings bled steel and concrete, and beneath the chaos, one image stood frozen in time. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, coat ash-streaked, face grim, eyes searching the smoke like a man who had heard the verdict of history. Just hours earlier, Israel had stood firm, proud of its air superiority. The Iron Dome, David's sling, Arrow 3, the crown jewels of its multi-layered defense, promised to shield its people from any incoming threat. But that morning, those systems failed. Not because they weren't deployed, not because they weren't advanced, but because something more advanced, more unpredictable, had finally slipped through the cracks. The world has seen missile strikes before. But this was a shattering of belief. It was the moment Israel's long-guarded illusion of invulnerability cracked in full view of millions. It wasn't just a bombardment. It was an indictment. A message carved into the air with fire. Even your gods of iron can bleed. And so we must ask, was this simply another escalation in a long-standing conflict? Or are we witnessing the beginning of a geopolitical unraveling, a moment where symbols overpower sensors and wrath becomes precision? This is not a news story. This is a reckoning, and it has only just begun. The missiles that roared into Tel Aviv did not simply carry explosives, they carried decades of accumulated rage. For Iran, this was not a spontaneous retaliation. It was the fulfillment of a promise etched into its political memory and spiritual identity since the 1980s. The reasons were layered: historical, ideological, strategic. It began with the assassinations of nuclear scientists on Iranian soil, allegedly by Mossad. Then came the cyber sabotage of Natanz, where Iran's uranium centrifuges were crippled. In 2022, Israeli air raids flattened portions of Syrian territory hosting Iranian forces. And most recently, a trio of Israeli-American precision strikes took out facilities in Isfahan, Fordow, and even near Qom, crossing what Tehran deemed a sacred line. But perhaps most unforgivable was the blood spilled in Gaza, an open wound for the Islamic Republic. Each death broadcast in the Muslim world, each airstrike on a refugee camp, further ignited the Shiite doctrine of martyrdom and retribution. Then, without warning, the Crimson Banner was hoisted over the Jamkaran Mosque. To most outsiders, it was just a flag. To Iranians, it was a spiritual declaration of war. In Shia theology, a red flag signals unavenged blood and the invocation of divine justice. It had not been raised in decades. By the time the world noticed, it was too late. The attack on Tel Aviv wasn't just a military maneuver. It was Iran, speaking in the only language it believed Israel would understand: fire, precision, and historic rage. Not an act of retaliation, an act of reckoning. For decades, Israel built its reputation not only on strength, but on invulnerability. A nation whose skies were sealed by layered shields, whose enemies could strike only in dreams. That illusion died at dawn. The first wave of Iranian missiles pierced deep, bypassing Iron Dome, confusing David's sling, and outmaneuvering Arrow 3. Sensors lit up in red, sirens howled, but interceptions fell short. Tel Aviv, once cocooned in confidence, burned under its own arrogance. Military analysts across the globe were stunned. How could a non-nuclear, heavily sanctioned nation break through the world's most celebrated missile defense system? There were no obvious answers, only possibilities. Some speculated that the Fatah-1 hypersonic system had used low-altitude flight patterns to mask its signature. Others suspected that Iran had deployed saturation tactics, launching decoys alongside real warheads to overwhelm Israeli response time. And then there was a darker theory. What if the Israelis never anticipated a missile to maneuver mid-air? Colonel Jack Renshaw, NATO Missile Strategy Advisor. Either way, the psychological shock was absolute. This wasn't just about the physical breach. It was about shattering belief that Israel could no longer protect its cities, its citizens, or even its leadership. Video emerged of Netanyahu hurried into an underground bunker, eyes blank, lips sealed. A leader forced to swallow the very myth he had helped construct. For the first time in modern history, the sky above Israel no longer belonged to Israel, and the world took notice. The name Fatah-1 now echoes like a curse across Israeli war rooms, a missile unlike any in Iran's arsenal, and perhaps the first true hypersonic threat the Middle East has ever seen. Developed in secret by Iran's IRGC aerospace division, the Fatah-1 isn't merely fast. It's a maneuverable hypersonic glide vehicle, MAY-RV, capable of reaching Mach 13, or over 16,000 km/h in mid-flight. But what terrifies defense experts isn't just speed, it's unpredictability. Most ballistic missiles follow a predictable parabolic arc, but Fatah-1 breaks that rule entirely. As it re-enters the atmosphere, it begins to swerve, adjusting trajectory like a predator circling in for the kill. This is made possible by its variable re-entry vehicle, VRV technology, allowing the warhead to change course mid-air, confusing radar locks and rendering interception nearly impossible. Its maximum range of 1,400 kilometers means that every inch of Israeli territory is within striking distance, launched directly from Iranian soil. No foreign bases or proxy territories required. Perhaps most alarming is its payload capacity. Fatah-1 can carry up to 1,000 pounds of warhead, making it suitable for not just conventional high-explosive payloads, but nuclear warheads if weaponization proceeds. It's not just a missile, it's a strategic reset button. Dr. Eli Bartov, Israeli defense technologist. Unlike Iran's older Shahab series, or even the Sejal, the Fatah-1 was never built for deterrence. It was built for penetration, precision, and psychological warfare. For decades, Israel maintained technological superiority. Now, that edge is bleeding. Because if the skies can be cracked open by a missile like Fatah-1, what fortress is left to believe in? As smoke from Tel Aviv still curled into the sky, a darker storm loomed, not of missiles, but of uranium and centrifuges, hidden in the shadows of Iranian deserts. According to a recently leaked IAEA intelligence brief, Iran now possesses more than 408 kilograms of uranium enriched up to 60%, just a technical breath away from weapons grade at 90%. The stockpile is enough to potentially produce 9 to 10 nuclear warheads, depending on warhead design. This isn't speculation, it's science, and Tehran is no longer cooperating. In March 2025, Iran terminated the last active camera feeds at enrichment sites in Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, cutting off international visibility and accountability. IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi told the UN Security Council, "Iran has significantly curtailed our ability to monitor and verify. We are now blind in areas where the world cannot afford darkness." What terrifies nuclear analysts isn't just the quantity of uranium. It's how fast Iran can convert it. Estimates suggest that Iran could reach 90% of enrichment in under 14 days and produce its first functional nuclear bomb within 3 to 6 months. Moreover, Satellite imagery revealed unusual underground excavation activity near Qom and a possible missile loading bay, raising fears that Iran may already be integrating warheads with delivery systems, likely the Fatah 1. There is also a chilling wild card: missing uranium. During coordinated Israeli-US airstrikes on several facilities in May 2025, trucks carrying enriched materials reportedly disappeared hours before the bombing began. Where that uranium is now, no one knows. This isn't the usual nuclear posturing. This is a state inching toward breakout, under the cover of strategic chaos and the fog of war. If Fatah 1 is the sword, enriched uranium is the poison now seeping into its tip. And once that warhead is mounted, it won't just be Tel Aviv that burns. It could be history itself. The moment Tel Aviv went up in flames, the world held its breath, not just out of fear for Israel, but because the rules of the global chessboard had changed. In Washington, President Kamala Harris convened the National Security Council within the hour. Leaked transcripts from that emergency session reveal a split. One faction pushed for surgical containment strikes against Iranian launch sites. Another, led by CENTCOM analysts, urged caution. Retaliation without intelligence will fan the fire into a regional war, warned General Marcus Avery. Meanwhile, European allies fractured. France called for restraint. Germany offered to broker ceasefire talks, and the UK quietly redeployed its air assets to Cyprus and Bahrain. NATO's Secretary-General issued a bland condemnation, but stopped short of invoking any Article 5-like solidarity with Israel, citing the non-member regional nature of the conflict. Across the Gulf, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, while historically hostile to Iran, remained conspicuously silent. Intelligence reports suggest back-channel diplomacy is underway, with Riyadh calculating the risk of becoming the next target if they publicly align with Israel. China and Russia, meanwhile, seized the narrative. Beijing condemned Western provocation, while Moscow called the Iranian strikes predictable acts of defensive sovereignty. In a pointed jab, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov declared, "The era of unilateral military domination has ended. What we're witnessing is not collapse, it is correction." But perhaps most significant is the return of Donald Trump to the international stage. Recently re-elected, his administration has reignited its maximum pressure doctrine, sending aircraft carriers to the Strait of Hormuz and freezing Iranian oil assets. Yet, the world wonders, will Trump's renewed aggression provoke compliance or accelerate Tehran's march toward a bomb? Israel, meanwhile, is isolated. Once surrounded by sympathy, it now faces quiet hesitation. As Tel Aviv smolders, it becomes clear: the world's alliances are not forged in treaties. They're shaped in fire. And right now, no capital wants to stand too close to the next explosion. The red flag still flutters above the Jamkaran Mosque, silent yet deafening in its message. The blood has not been avenged yet. In Tel Aviv, smoke drifts like a shroud over a city no longer certain of the skies. The illusion of invulnerability is gone. The myth has shattered. Israel, once the region's iron bastion, is now a nation exposed, its people waking not just to ruins, but to a future rewritten in the language of fire. And the question that lingers like radiation in the wind is chilling. Does Iran already possess a nuclear warhead? There's no definitive proof. No warhead paraded. No test detonation. But perhaps that's the most dangerous truth of all. Uncertainty is the new weapon. "We are not afraid of what we know," said retired Israeli strategist Dan Nivron. We are afraid of what we don't know, and right now, we know nothing. That fear is what turns every missile alert into a nuclear countdown. That ambiguity is what fractures alliances, stalls diplomacy, and drives panic into war rooms from Jerusalem to Riyadh, Brussels to Washington. The world now teeters not on the edge of a confirmed apocalypse, but on the suspicion of one, the silent dread that at any moment a Fatah 1 may carry not a conventional payload, but a sun. And if that day comes, there will be no sirens loud enough, no domes strong enough, to stop a war not born of ambition, but of prophecy, vengeance, and silence too long endured. So we ask again, was this a strike or a warning before the end? If this leaves you with more questions than answers, let your voice be heard. Comment below and follow us for the stories behind the silence.